we don't really understand exchange. We don't, as a society, understand money in a complex and deep way and how powerful we are with every dollar. What our dollar does right now, it's called the extractive economy. They're extracting constantly. But with the regenerative economy, we start to see that we can give back, that our money has an impact. What we're learning is that money can regenerate our community.
Welcome back to the So Good to Grow Good podcast, the show that explores how changemakers and innovators are building sustainable systems for a better future. I'm your host, John Kane Gonzales, an entrepreneur fascinated by how mission-driven leaders turn ideas into real, scalable impact. Today's guest is Chris Hewitt, co-founder and executive director of Hudson Valley Current, a nonprofit local currency system that's been transforming how communities think about money, abundance, and economic development for over 12 years. Chris is also the creator of Tilda's Kitchen Market, which serves over 10,000 meals annually while anchoring the currency ecosystem, and the publisher of Midtown Lively, reaching 5,000 readers monthly with stories about food, art, and local exchange. He's a graduate of the GCSEN Social Entrepreneurship Bootcamp, a serial entrepreneur who's proven that alternative economic models can thrive when built on trust, community, relationships, and abundance thinking. In our conversation, Chris shares how a simple idea from a 2004 conference became a thriving 400-plus member currency system, how Tilda's Kitchen became the heart of the currency, and what it takes to shift an entire region's narrative about money and wealth circulation. Let's dive in. Welcome, Chris. So good to have you here.
Thanks, Kane. It's great to be here. I'm excited to talk with you.
Me too. I have been fortunate and blessed to have known you for just about a year now, and hearing all the work that you're doing is just always inspiring. But I wonder if we can just start a little bit from the beginning. Tell me about this conference that sparked some of the ideas of Current.
Well, at the time in 2004, I was working at a print shop in Rosendale called Canal Press, and I grew up in a printing family, always fascinated by journalism and publishing, but also how it affects the economy. So the guy who owned the print shop said, "Do you want to go to this conference? It's called Local Currencies in the 21st Century." And I thought, wow, that sounds amazing. And so I went with my boss from the print shop. And coincidentally, the founder of the Hudson Valley Current, the co-founder, was also there, David McCarthy. We didn't know each other yet. It would be 6 years till we would meet each other. But in 2004, it started setting this foundation for our knowledge on the fact that it's legal to make local currency. And so 2004 came and went, and 6 years later, that's when we started putting the Current into action.
Right. And maybe this is a good time to just dive a little bit deeper into the Current. What is the Current?
Well, there's many different forms of local currency. This one is called a barter exchange. The IRS recognizes it as a barter exchange, and they call one current, one barter credit. So it's a way to keep track of barters between businesses that don't like to put things under the table. Many people don't realize even if you barter apples for pears, you're supposed to keep track of the value, and that's a taxable event. So somewhere on your tax form, there's a schedule where you enter your barter quantity for the year. And so some people use that to keep track of their barters, but many people just let barters go under the table. But I have a large enough business where I want to keep track of who I'm bartering with, how frequently, and when they reciprocate. So this local currency helps us keep track of all the barters we have in our community.
Got you. So I heard it's been looked at by the IRS, and they say it's all good.
Yeah, I've been interviewed by different federal and state agencies, and there's about 5 agencies that regulate local currency, including the IRS.
Right. I mean, that's huge, because I don't think many people understand, that it is possible to create your own local currency. How was that process for you?
Well, it's funny. In economics, in the world of economics, they say anything can be currency. The trick is getting someone to accept it. So you could technically use acorns as currency if you could get all your neighbors to accept those acorns. That is actual currency if you're accepting it as a symbol for something else that represents some other form of value, But in order to create a local currency, in a way, you just need to build community. Because when you had a bonfire last night, for example, you were building currency through community by maybe exchanging drinks, and someone's the fire maker. Someone brought some of the food. We all have something to contribute. And over time, money became a representation for those real values. So
Hmm.
you could start small by saying, I'll watch your kids this weekend
Hmm.
and just give me some of your apples off your tree. That's a traditional barter. But in order to build a local currency, there's different models that people can learn through books like Thomas Greco's Money, finding and creating alternatives to legal tender. That was the first book that I got into that really sparked my interest in local currency. Thomas Greco is a great thinker in community currencies and economics. And then I started reading books like Agenda for a New Economy or Debt, the First 5,000 Years. People can read a simple book if they want to get a local currency off the ground. And then there's a lot of resources to help nonprofits or for-profits with these currencies.
Right. I mean, there's something beautiful in this story, and what you've been sharing is that in many ways everything is a form of exchange, if I could say it that much. And the way that we go about doing exchange in this day in life, or in this modern day, is through what we call legal tender. But what I'm hearing from you is that underlying this all, there's a greater understanding of what it is that we're actually exchanging. There's like a reason why, and I'm curious how you would put that into words.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head during the intro where you said that the current is helping communities understand exchange. We don't really understand exchange. We know that the dollar works to buy us things, to earn us money for our jobs, but we don't, as a society, understand money in a complex and deep way and how powerful we are with every dollar. We just had election day this week. That's once a year that we can make an impact, right? When actually we're making an impact every single day with our dollar. We send signals. If I go buy a tuna sandwich, I'm sending a signal to the tuna industry that I'm interested in tuna, for example. And so how do I use my dollars to create sustainable futures, strong environmental regulations? We're not taught those things. So I keep building models that I call undercurrents to help people understand. Because in this conversation, we're
Hmm.
philosophizing. It's fun to say, yeah, we need other models, but still, we need the dollar to pay rent. We need the dollar to pay our utilities and many other things. So in a way, we're addicted to the dollar and afraid to not have enough of it. So that obstacle has created what I call the catch-22 in local currency. So many people, they tell me they would sign up for the current if there was enough things to buy, but not enough people are signing up because they're afraid to use it. And so if everyone who said I would sign up signed up at the same time, there would be plenty of goods and services within the system. Out of our 400 members, we have enough goods and services to, on a good month, 20,000 currents are exchanged. Our highest month ever was 25,000 currents in 1 month. And in the last 12 years, 2 million currents, it's been ramping up to be 20,000 a month, 25,000 a month. But in the early days, it was very difficult to use the current because the members were so dispersed in Ulster County. Then they started being dispersed in Dutchess County. And if I had 1,000 currents, I would have to drive to multiple towns just to use my currents. So we built these new the first one was Livelihood, which is now called Midtown Lively, our publication about food, art, and exchange. That was your way as a current member to buy advertising, to get graphic design, to get marketing services, all these things that we were offering to the membership, but not everyone needs
Hmm.
it. So I realized that the publication wasn't strong enough to fix that catch-22 of local currency. So we built a restaurant. In September 2020, we launched Tilda's Kitchen as an exchange center where people can understand what is local currency, who are the members, how do I use it, all these things we're now addressing here at Tilda's for our members. So we call it Tilda's Kitchen because the logo for our local currency is 3 tildes, like the tilde above the ñ in Spanish. The logo for a current is a tilde. So that's why this is called Tilda's Kitchen. It's named after the currency.
Gotcha. Yeah, I totally appreciate it. When I went to that restaurant, I thought it was actually, I was looking for Tilda. Like, is Tilda
Uh-huh.
around? But I
I love
love
it.
the weaving of the entire concept. It's quite masterful, and everything that you've shared. Like it really touches on that quote by Buckminster Fuller. Like, how does it go again? You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To
Hmm.
change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete.
That's right.
And I hear you in everything you're doing is the idea of a local currency or an alternative currency is amazing, but you have to create other systems and other channels to make it more real. And essentially, you're taking care of that entire ecosystem, it sounds like.
That's right. In the early days in 2014, 2015, I wanted everyone to understand the current quickly. And when people didn't understand it, I thought, what's wrong with all these people? But it's ingrained in us not to understand what money is. We don't want to think hard about it because I think we're comfortable with the fact that it works. The dollar is an amazing invention, and the purpose of the current is not to replace the dollar, but to complement it and to strengthen local supply chains. So I think now that I'm 12 years as the director here, I'm a gentle current. I'm not a Russian current anymore. It's okay if we don't understand it. But by building these models, we start to get used to changing the way we purchase. We get used to buying from the local farm instead of the farms from Chile or from China, where things are being shipped around the world. So
Hmm.
local currency is also an environmental solution because it's decreasing the amount of petroleum we need to ship things. It's a
Hmm. Hmm.
solution to many parts of our economy. And I've always thought this local currency is the solution. But actually, there are many, over time, we started building hybrid models because it's also about how we communicate. So we have a publication. It's about how we eat, and it's about how we support our local farmers. So we built a restaurant. And I think you almost were alluding to this, like, I'll build more models too if I have to. I'll build a shoe store to encourage local shoe production. I'll make a paper and cardboard factory. Whatever we have to do to fill those missing gaps in the economy, that's our future plans.
I definitely that was alluding to that, and I see that you're quite the capable person to do that. I mean, you already have three other things or two other things on top of the currency, so and that's a lot to undertake, for a small organization, I could say. And but growing 400 members plus, how have you been seeing the community in terms of growing this platform?
I think what's interesting is whenever there's ripples in the national economy, we see a huge uptick in the people signing up for the current. So during 2020, the current started taking off. There's a saying that the fish doesn't think about the water it swims in until it's polluted. And then you start thinking, why is this water polluted? So in 2020, as the dollar was crumbling, people signed up for the current really quickly. And then the federal government created the Paycheck Protection Program and the employee retention credits, and all these federal programs made the current a little less important. And so it took off, and then we watched it slump again, which is okay because what we're doing is filling a gap in our economy to make it sure we can always exchange when the national economy fluctuates. That's the history of currencies. Throughout thousands of years, local currencies exist. And wherever they exist, that town or that region is stabilized from national fluctuations. So we believe that right now I'm seeing a lot of signups based on the political environment, based on snap cuts, federal shutdown. I think in this week alone, we've had 5 signups, which is pretty steady. That's a fast amount of new signups. So I
Hmm.
think it
I
takes
mean,
off as the economy fluctuates, but at the same time, then we start to realize how to localize our supplies.
gotcha. And you're touching on this a lot. Um, Local economies, communities. Just in your words, like, why is supporting local economies important?
Well, we can see from old books or even old movies how main streets used to thrive in a different way because there was micro industries and cottage industries all around that main street. People making flour, people making furniture, people, farriers making shoes for horses. All the combined things in our economy were right on Main Street where you could see each other thriving and succeeding. And over time, our offshoring of jobs, our offshoring of talents made it so that we've lost track of how to can tomato sauce, how to make a chair. And by localizing these things and by having what's now being called more and more a bioregional economy, then my region thrives in a certain way. And let's say Vermont is thriving in a certain way. And you have overlapping
Hmm.
bioregions thriving at the edges in a different way. So what I
Hmm.
think is happening is Gen X and millennials are starting to get older, and like I'm 50, I just turned 50. I'm in the heart of Gen X, and we're starting to bring our evolutionary ideas into government policy decisions, into communities, and we need to rebuild community life. Main streets that are walkable, bikeable, that we can support each other in a way that doesn't require massive amounts of petroleum. That's the biggest thing, is substitute petroleum makes it easy for us to sprawl and put pavement everywhere. Whereas if you centralize your activities, your economy can thrive. And I think the future is cottage industry, decentralization.
Right. And that was exactly what I was about to say. What I'm seeing with solutions like yours and many solutions that are coming out is no longer the day of the one size shoe fits all. It was a great idea to begin with for organization, but then we're hitting limitations now where because we're centralizing things on the outskirts or into the different communities and towns, we're finding that the solutions just don't fit. And the cost to support or maintain that only increases. And, as a net result, we're getting higher expenses and lesser quality. And, what I've been seeing personally in my life is the return to something simpler, and like you said, cottage industries and things of that nature, having spent some time with indigenous cultures and communities of that nature, it's really like living in a village.
Yeah, I think that is the future for us, is homesteading in walkable villages.
Yeah. I'm wondering, what do you think about the economic concept of production frontiers? Is it just garbage?
Well, tell me a little bit more about it.
Okay, so I learned this in my first year of university. I did Economics 101. Production frontiers is this idea that different regions are suited for specific production. Like they can develop things better because they have the resources for that. And so the idea is that you push all of that production for that specific thing into that region.
Thank you for
And
defining it.
then yeah, and then as a result, then the idea is that if we all just focus on what we do best, and if we bring it together, then we should be able to maximize our output, in a far more efficient way.
Yeah.
But then I think it had a very I'm not an economist, but it had a very short-sighted view of systems thinking because I've been hearing from you, keeping things local and trading and working local, having all the energy concentrated in a decentralized manner actually produces far more benefit for that region, even if that region is not necessarily suited for that.
Yeah, actually love the idea of focusing production in certain areas. I am friends with Assemblyman Ron Kim. He's in the state assembly representing Queens. He was on the Hudson Valley Current board for a while. And I taught a class to one of his law classes at Cornell about the 5 regions of New York, and how I believe that we can base 5 regions of New York's economy on the Japanese prefecture system. In Japan, the prefectures specialize in certain things like Hida beef or Takayama cedar, for example. And each region focuses on it, not just focuses on it, but have been focusing on it for thousands of years. So they maintain
Hmm.
their culture and tradition by having those regions produce certain things. So I think in New York State, it's like the Finger Lakes region would focus on grapes and grape products. The
Right.
Hudson Valley would focus on farms and produce. Long Island and the city would be seafood. The Adirondacks would be lumber. Capital region might be policy and administration. And maple syrup in the Adirondacks too. These are economies that the state can promote through economic development that trade with each other. And the idea of the presentation was building 5 local currencies, and they're all named. We don't plan to expand the current beyond 5 counties. So then what step? We would like to be fungible to the other 4 local currencies in New York State, where I could turn my currents into Ithaca bucks or whatever, and go travel to Ithaca and use my local currency, but I was able to transfer it to that other local currency.
Gotcha. So there is what I'm hearing is that regional specialization is a good idea. Further than that, there's probably limitations to that model, which is why when we have a central financial system, we're seeing some of the inefficiencies and the cost of that.
And I think also by focusing too hard on regional production, it can stifle competition. I think competition is good for only entrepreneurship. It's good for innovation. It's good for the economy. But when it becomes monopolies, as we're seeing in our economy today, then main streets get the life sucked out of them. It's too hard to compete against subsidized Walmart or subsidized petroleum. And so we're not building cool microtransit solutions when we're up against the auto lobby, the petroleum asphalt lobby. So I believe that if we had a different view of bidding and procurement in municipalities, then we would purchase differently from companies. Here's an example. There's a company called Axon that has most contract in most municipalities. They're landing the contracts for body cameras and the taser that's attached to them. Now that those two technologies are becoming aligned, they're landing every contract for both the tasers and the body cameras. And so this multi-billion-dollar multinational corporation that's also building weapons of war. So every time we land that contract, we're giving them money for their weapons of war also. Think about the impact, the financial impact that these contracts have. And they're multi-million, hundreds of millions every year that we're working with giant multinational monopolies. And we haven't had a strong trust-busting campaign because here's my idea on the body cameras. We know people in film and television and technology, like Marker Tech is up in Saugerties. It's an employee-owned company. Imagine our local economic development department said, Axon keeps landing this contract for cameras. Do you think you can compete? And maybe they don't have enough employees or a large enough facility, but our local municipality can help them land that contract. Now you're building competition for those giant monopolies on a local basis.
I think you're touching on an interesting point, which is that larger producers reach economies of scale, which means they can offer products and services cheaper. And so, I feel like this is one of the challenges of developing a local currency. Is it might mean or will likely mean that the product or service is expensive. And so, how do you or how does Current communicate that issue, or is that an issue rather?
That's a great question that can bring us back to social entrepreneurship, because not everything is about the bottom line in social entrepreneurship. It's about the triple bottom line. So at Tilda's, for example, we've never bought a plastic container for our food. We only ever buy compostable containers, which are at least double the price. And I could spend half the money if I bought stupid clamshell plastic containers that actually aren't even recyclable. Many people think clamshells are recyclable, but they go straight into the waste stream because of different reasons that make them not recyclable. That's expensive for us. So we have to make values decision based on the other P in multiple bottom line, which is planet. Not only do we care about profit, we care about our people and we care about the planet. So sometimes we have to charge more per plate here or sell more sponsorships or land better grants to subsidize my pricing. Because if I actually pass that cost through on everything that we do here, we have a composting system that comes every week to pick up our compost. Our garbage footprint is very small because we care so much, but this costs extra labor to separate our garbage, So to answer your question, we lose some money by doing the right thing. And I earn enough each week to pay all of our people well. So it's interesting because is it really about me getting rich? Obviously not, because it's a nonprofit and I'm a director with a fixed salary. If Tilda's took off and we started selling millions of units of dumplings or something, that doesn't increase my pay. So in a profit model, the owners are always trying to get rich. That's why I think that the food system is slightly broken, because if the food system for groceries and restaurants worked, we wouldn't have hungry people on our streets.
What I'm hearing as well, like from you, is it's not just about replacing the currency, it's about replacing belief systems and mindsets. To wrap that up is, how do you, I remember you saying that there was this fear about using current. Uh, has that been that communicating that to people, like there's more to it than just the financials here that we need to consider? How have you been communicating that? And is education a big piece of the work that Current is doing?
Yeah, I think that education is huge and it has been since the beginning. So about 6 years ago, I hired a sales coach to teach me what I was doing wrong. Because for about 5 or 6 years, I was repelling people every time I would explain the current, and I would see their eyes roll back in their head. I'm like, oh, I lost another one. As soon as I started explaining money to people, I would lose people. So this sales coach taught me to talk about the 4 primary benefits of the current instead. So now I talk about how it's innovative because people who use it are trailblazers and we do new things for our economy. It's hyperlocal because it can never leave our economy. It's not convertible to dollars, so it keeps circulating through our towns. It shifts the narrative. It helps us talk about money in a different way. And cryptocurrencies help us with this, so that there's something besides the dollar. So that's been very helpful. And the 4th benefit is it saves money, because there's no interest and there's no fees. It's free to sign up. If you go below 0 and use your line of credit, there's no interest on that line of credit. And there's no fees when you pay it extra. So also the business owners are saving because there's no transaction fees. So now I talk about these features. And over the 12 years I've been the director, at the beginning, we used to call it the new economy that was evolving. And then as cooperatives started coming into the fold more in the United States and more people are talking about cooperatives, it started to be called the solidarity economy. And I love that, about working together. But the other word I love for this new economy is the regenerative economy, because what we're learning is that money can regenerate our community, that we can have a place like this that has free soup every day because the owner's not taking all the profits. There's extra money within the business to benefit our community. And so that's the people component. We keep paying it back forward to the community. And so what our dollar does right now, it's called the extractive economy. They're extracting constantly, not only from main streets and our wealth and our production and our fields and our forests and our mines and all these resources they take from us. It's so extractive, just to centralize it elsewhere in corporate headquarters. But with the regenerative economy, we start to see that we can give back, that our money has an impact. Every dollar we spend can stay here and keep having a velocity and a multiplier effect that keeps coming around and benefiting us. So I love this idea of regenerative, because the extractive economy is actually worse than most people know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just love listening to you speak about these things, and because the way you communicate is just, it's down to earth, and it's very interconnected, because I can see the whole system in my mind of how you're weaving things together. So
Awesome.
I'm curious, like, for our audiences, social entrepreneurs or even founders themselves, and the interviews I've been having so far, they have very, very like technical solutions.
Hmm.
And I think one of the main challenges as well, on top of education, is communication. And I wonder, I remember you saying that you started a magazine way back in the day. How has your understanding of communications with mediums like magazines changed, or similar to how you are now communicating current with that sales coach you had? What was the biggest shift there?
Well, in the early days of my publishing, I started a national publication in 1996. And back then, I had just graduated college. And back then, we would have huge articles. And my wife, my sister, and I would be like, how many pages do we want? 52, 48? Let's do 48 pages. We didn't base it on how much we sold in advertising. We just wanted to make a magazine. So when I was in my early 20s publishing, it was really about being a revolutionary. And I wanted to have a megaphone on the top of the mountains to let everyone know the world. Did you know the world is messed up? Yeah, we were going to make millions on the subscriptions that we were going to sell. and people didn't subscribe. They were getting angry at us because I think in the mid to late 90s, not as many people were willing to listen to the problems, willing to admit that we were complicit in the world's problems. And so slowly my publishing efforts have gotten more condensed, where we don't have long form articles anymore. The longest piece I have is 750 words now, whereas something like a science journal might have a 5,000 word piece that's investigative, that's deep, it's broad. I love those articles still, but our readers don't want those articles. So, but in our new publication, we just changed the name to Kingston Lively from Midtown Lively to make it
Uh-huh.
more broad all around Kingston. But it's very punchy and short. And then even sometimes we're making a big point with a question like, what have you changed in your life this year? But the answer is short. We get to know some of our neighbors. I would have liked to hear them talk for a while. And in fact, in the audio that we have, they all speak for a long time. So someday we might have a podcast that gives them a better platform. But for now, my readers like it real short. This is the longest piece. It's our feature article. And what I've learned is to create good news. In the early days, I was a revolutionary. Like I said, I wanted to shout from the mountain. And I realized that my biggest impact comes from having a calm heart, a good vision, a peaceful energy. And so I've become an evolutionary instead, someone who will change slowly over time with my community, with my friends, with my neighbors. I used to want to change so quickly I would leave people behind, including my original board of the Hudson Valley Current. At that time, I was a serial entrepreneur who just wanted to make progress, and
Yeah.
I had to learn how to be a nonprofit leader, which is slow
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
and include everybody.
Yeah. There's something there because I'm the same way in many respects. It's what I find, at least in social entrepreneurship, and I may be wrong. This might be on my own spheres, but there's a different type or quality of leadership. It's very much that you have to bring everyone along with you on the ride. And I'm curious, from your perspective, like why, what are the challenges? Let's just put the mindset on of like someone who is looking to do a social enterprise of some sort. When it comes to creating change, what are the common challenges, or what are actually the challenges that most people don't know about when it comes to putting something out there? And this applies to almost any innovation, I would think as well. But
I think consistency is key because sometimes we get into something for maybe attention or the glory of it or the headlines, and then we're only in it for a short period. Whereas water takes years and sometimes generations to make an impact. It's slow flowing. That's why I like to say I'm a gentle current. Now I'm the gentle current that's taking the path of least resistance. And so I think that for me, this is my life. It's my lifestyle to be involved in the local economy. You heard at the fundraising dinner the other day that I'm stepping down in 2026 as the director, but I'm doing that in order to take the path of least resistance. We have 400 members. They want to use the current, but I have done a poor job of re-engaging them in the last 5 years because I launched a successful publication and a restaurant. And so I
mm,
did that to make it easier for the current to flow. And now we have these two projects that both take 100% currents for everything: catering, over the counter sales, breakfast, lunch, dinner, all the products on the shelves, the books behind me. Everything can now engage more with the current. So I believe the next director is going to re-engage the membership of 400 or more people in January and February and create mixers that make sense. So like neighborhood clusters of members, like publishers, photographers, writers, restaurants, farmers, servers. These clusters, we're going to start having parties to bring the business types together so that they could start exchanging with each other. The new directors will be the current, and then I'll make sure our are still doing okay.
right. Again, I hate to be such a cheerleader, but as I'm listening to you, I'm just like picking up a very uh, unique thing about how you communicate, and I wonder, because many of your analogies are all tied back to the idea of a current of water of flowing. And was that something that you shifted in your communication as you became more involved in the current? Because it seems like something that when you're doing a project like this or a purpose like a mission like this, to this really, in some ways embody the mission like you're doing in your communication. Was that something that just came to you as you became more, I guess, involved, like the idea of embodying your philosophy? Or was that like a intentional shift in your language that you knew would be effective in your mission?
That's a great question because I think it's both. It has evolved over time because the current is something that I've developed for 12 years and I live it, and I love the local economy. I love local producers and vendors and social services, and and I feel like the goal for me is to stay on message about a peace economy. And so this brings me back to my college days. After high school, I discovered Gandhi because I grew up in a violent high school where there were fights every weekend. And I pretty much became the medic who dragged my bloody friends out of really bad fights. And when I discovered Gandhi in 12th grade, I realized there's a different way as a Long Islander with a very closed view of the world, because that's how many Long Islanders are taught. And so when I went to college and opened my horizons and read all of Gandhi's works and everything about him, I started becoming more of a nonviolent practitioner. And in those early days, before the current, I used water analogies and how a rock can a cliff and have a major impact in that blast, but the water can fall for generations and have a bigger impact than the rock over time. So I used to use analogies like that with my thinking on Gandhi. And just recently, I took a workshop on the peace economy from the national organization Code Pink, and they're talking more and more about a peace economy. And now I'm seeing a full circle as I'm starting to step down from the current. I'm going to stay on the board, so I'll be highly involved, and I'm going to continue to build for-profit businesses that take currents. Like, I think in the spring, I might start a gardening company, and then the new director will have a place to send our members. My rickshaw company, my garden company, anything I start will take currents. So my future will be liquid, and so is my past.
But I want to talk about now about just the more of the business side of things, not so much as a for-profit, but just understanding how your operation works. And again, this is to help other people understand what it means to be running a social enterprise or a nonprofit. Just looking at your revenue, like how do you go about um, getting the funds that you need? What I've read, and this may be wrong, is about 80, it's like 80% donations, 20% from other things. What would be sustainable revenue? What would sustainable revenue look like to you? And how are you looking about diversifying your revenue?
Well, in the early days in 2014, we were at an unhealthy balance of revenue because we were primarily grant funded. So in 2014, we were 95% relying on grant funding. And over 12 years, I've flipped it to be more like 60% diversified revenue and 40% grant funding. So it's less than half of what we depend on, but we get major funding every year. Last year, my budget was over 600,000, and about 40% was grant funding. So that meant, where else am I getting funding, and how do I stabilize this organization that has a nonprofit local currency with all of the things we have to pay for, a restaurant and a magazine. So we have not only this was a huge breakthrough for the organization to have a for-profit model like a restaurant as a revenue engine. In places like Hudson Valley Association in Columbia County, they have 900-acre farm, they have K through 12 Montessori education, and they have a grocery store. And so it's a nonprofit that I've learned from. The director is a huge inspiration, Martin Ping, of how to create what we call additional profit centers. So because I'm an entrepreneur, I know how to make profitable profitable businesses, but I wanted to be a nonprofit leader in order to benefit my community more with my ability to raise money. So this for-profit restaurant model is actually a nonprofit community kitchen, and nobody gives tips here. When they try, because we love giving tips, and I actually think tips are bad for employees and bad for employees. It makes the employer able to pay less, and it makes them worse employers, and it makes an employee always wondering if tips are going to come in. Instead, here at the Hudson Valley Current, we pay everyone well enough that they agreed that all tips go toward our free soup program. So they make a stable hourly income that they can rely upon. And then the tips, because our customers can't help it, that is part of our revenue stream called individual donations. It's now become a really significant part of the revenue. That's part of what is called individual donations. Then we have business sponsorships. That's part of the donations also. We have board giving. Every board member is required to give every year. And then we have over-the-counter sales, catering, and additional business advertising. So there's about 8 to 10 revenue streams that we've created diversification over the last 12 years.
Right. And, this is interesting because, a lot of nonprofits that I know, and I work in that sector as well, or grants, let's say, I work in the grant sector, it is often the question, like grant funding, often people become reliant on it. And I think what you're saying here, which maybe is something maybe you could share with folks, is like how to think about how to run a nonprofit to find these alternative streams. I mean, you figured it out pretty quickly because you were an entrepreneur. You know how to make money. But what do you think is that? What do you think it blocks nonprofits from being able to create alternative or additional revenue streams so they're not reliant on grant funding?
Well, I think it's something you mentioned at the beginning, a statistic or a goal or a number, like we should be 80% individual donation, 20% grants. Whatever it is for the organization should be determined by the board of directors, or sometimes the director, in a good annual cash flow budget, in a good annual operating plan. All these things can help us see the year and how much money we need to bring in. So what one of my mentors calls it ratcheting your fundraising. So if you get $100,000 grant, that's not a bad thing. You wanted that $100,000. But what you should do right away is ratchet that success by asking a business to sponsor the program, to approach government, to approach individuals, all at the same time, and leverage the 100,000 by saying, we were able to raise money for our program, but can you also contribute? That's the perfect time to ask, because you're not asking in a way that you feel deficient. That's right. You feel encouraged, and you want them involved in this success. That's when donors want to give, when it feels like a success. So that's called ratcheting your funding. You ratchet that 100,000 by ratcheting up another thing, and then maybe you get a $20,000 government grant and ratchet that success also.
That's a beautiful tactic, like to piggyback off of a win, and takes the edge off the organization from feeling like they need money from other people or from other donors in order to actually operate. I think it's a really, really beautiful strategy, let's say. So what is, you have 400 plus members now. What has that been like in terms of adoption? Has it been a steady stream from day one, or has there been ebbs and flows? And what is your churn rate, and how do you keep people engaged?
In the early days, we thought that our mission and our goal was to get 2,000, 3,000 members very quickly, and then up to 5,000 members. So we had lots to offer everybody. But we quickly realized that the real metric is the satisfaction of each member, because the more each member is satisfied, the more they're going to transact with other members. So our metric over time became total number of transactions, not total members, because if you have 1,000 unsatisfied members, the system can start to fall apart. So I think it was right before we started Tilda's in 2019, we cleaned up our membership of over 600 members, and we started reaching out to everyone and saying, do you think you'll use it? Are you still interested? Very simple questions to get the people who weren't interested at all. They unsubscribed quickly. But then we started working with other members to see how to engage them. And it was successful. We cleaned up 200 members that we were calling zombie members. If there's members who are system that will never use it, it actually throws off our statistics. And at that time, about 4 or 5% of the members were successfully using the current. And our board members during a strategic planning process said, what is it about that 4 or 5% of the members that's working? Let's replicate that. And that conversation is what led to Tilda's Kitchen. We realized each of them had a centralized way of using the current, whether they were part of my circle and my family or businesses that I would drive to help. It all was part of a support system. So we launched Tilda's in order to be more of a support system for the 400 ones. And I believe when we have our new director, February, we're probably going to go down to 300 members. We're going to clean it up one more, and then we're going to cast a wide net because our infrastructure will be strong. We'll have a magazine, all the marketing services, ad revenue, sponsorship opportunities, and a restaurant. And with a newly engaged membership, I think the new director will be able to surpass 50,000 currents exchanged every week.
Yeah. There is a topic here that I'd love to explore with you at a different point, but there's, the analogy to cryptocurrencies is very much real, but this is a real currency. And I think, what would be helpful, because I think there's something very similar here with cryptocurrency and what you're doing, in the sense, like, people just don't understand, okay, what is it? Like, and how do I use it? So to kind of ground things for folks, what is the current, like, walk me through a transaction. What does that look like for an individual?
Nice. Well, let's say you and I both signed up today because we're both interested in using local currents. We would both need to have a good or a service that we offer. And so let's say I sign up today with my gardening company and I call it Lively Gardens. I start at zero, just like I would with a bank account. You sign up today as a journalist, a professional writer, and you and I are friends. So we both know that we're signing up at the same time, and you would like to hire me for some gardening. We could barter in a traditional sense, and you say, I'm a professional writer. I can write up your marketing for your website. And then I do your gardening and I get your writing, and the whole transaction disappears into the abyss. Or we could do it through the current because we're bartering anyway. And you and I both start at zero, but we both can go to negative 300. That's the line of credit. That's why we don't have dollars involved. I don't need to buy currents because I earn my currents. Just like you can't buy dollars. You have to earn your dollars. We figure out ways to earn dollars by offering goods and services into our local economy or national, wherever our job is. And so now you have enough currents to pay me 100 up to 300 currents because of your line of credit. But let's say the gardening job is only 100 currents because I did some weeding for you. You pay me 100 currents to my account. Your account goes to negative 100. My account goes to positive 100. That's why the system is called mutual credit. A mutual credit system means every negative matches a positive somewhere else in the system. And when we add up negative 100 and positive 100, it equals zero. And I love that because it's a reminder of what money really is a relationship between me and you. It was our agreement to exchange that 100 currents that made the money real.
Can you elaborate more on the mutual credit system? How does that actually work?
Sure. Well, we call the current many things. Sometimes we simply call it a local currency. The IRS calls it a barter exchange, and one current they call a barter credit. But economists call it a mutual credit system because not all local currencies use mutual credit. If you could buy into the system like the Berkshire, it's not mutual credit because you're using dollars to purchase that currency. So a lot of people think that when they set up their account, they see that they get a line of credit of 300 currents. They think we're giving them 300 currents. We're not. It's just like a credit card. When you get the credit card, they don't give you any money. They give you the ability to use your credit. We stopped calling it a line of credit because of what you've talked about, where when you have a line of credit at the bank, they charge you interest and fees and all these collateral charges that are associated with that line of credit, right? Because you need money, the wealthy people can say, here's some money. but you owe me on top of this interest, fees, all that, right? Well, because this is a community banking system, what we're trying to show is that we can decentralize our debt, and we all become a little central bank of our own. Because when you borrow $1,000 from a bank, that ultimately comes from the Federal Reserve's debt. They put that debt on their books and they hold it for you. They protect
Hmm.
you from being your real debt. But with the
Hmm.
current, you have that debt in your hands. You start at zero, and you can go below zero if you want. That puts you into debt to the community, not to the Hudson Valley Current. So that's why we don't charge interest and fees. Your debt doesn't affect our organization. All it's doing is giving you purchasing power, which one of our board members believes mutual credit should be a human right, because it builds a give and take between two humans, and it allows us to have a financial relationship without a bank.
Gotcha. It- I'm just curious on that. Like for me, it was a bit of a foreign concept to just be like, oh, we're going to give you $300 of currency or current rather. Uh, how was that like in convincing or not convincing, but at least getting people to adopt your solution? Was that a simple, easy conversation to have, or did it take some conversation like we're having right now to understand how that all works?
It's an ongoing conversation, and I'd say it will be my whole life. And for anyone who runs a local currency, it'll always be part of the conversation. Well, where did this money come from? And how did it come into circulation? What is it, right? But we don't ask those questions about the dollar. Imagine you ask me those three questions about the dollar. I have answers because I've studied this stuff. But would your neighbor know answers to those three questions? Where does it come from? What is debt? What is interest? What is inflation? We've heard the terms, and we know money works, and we know it works well. That's why, like, I talked to my nephew about money yesterday, and I told him how it's a store of value. It helps me put my tomatoes into the market, and then I have $20 instead of tomatoes. But it's also an IOU. If I'm giving you $20, then you agree to participate in that system in the future and accept $20 from somebody, or I would accept it from somebody. So it's a fascinating invention we've created, and the current will always have people asking us about what it is and how it works. And so my messaging over time has become simplified. People don't actually want to have this conversation. It hurts our brain. Somehow, with something reptilian kicks in and our eyes roll back and our nervous system disconnects back here when we start talking about money. We call it line of trust because there's no
Line of trust.
real interest or fees. We call it a line of trust. But I don't want to interrupt you. You had some nice momentum. So you start your account. You have the ability to use 300 currents.
Yes. And then now it's the question of, okay, well, I love the idea, Chris, but I don't see anyone on here. Like, how do okay, I have 300 current in my line of trust, but if I can't spend it anywhere, then does it really matter? So I think the question there I have for you is maybe part of the solution as well that you've cooked up is how to get people on the system to start using it as their form of exchange. What was that process like?
Well, in the early days in 2014, it was very difficult because the first 20 members were advertisers in my newspaper. So they barely knew each other, but they all knew me. So it was me as the central force pushing and pulling currents to and from them. And eventually I had to convince them to work with each other. It's a lot of work. But now that we have 400 members, I could tell you which farms to go to, which designer to hire, which web developer to work with. There's a lot of people and members that I could recommend to work with. But I also like to say that the current is what you make it. Let's say you had a babysitting network or a community um, um, sharing program. You can all sign up for the current and only trade with each other in that small neighborhood. It's a cluster of movement. You don't have to engage in Kingston and Woodstock because you're moving it in your own world. And so what it is, that reminds me, it's not only a mutual credit system, it's also called a complementary currency because it's meant to
Okay.
work with the national currency. It's not meant to replace the national currency because that's an amazing invention that allows us to travel, send kids to college, pay our taxes, all these things you need national currency for. But if
Hmm.
we more resilient bioregional pools of local currency, we would get better, like we were talking about with prefectures and zones and biological
Hmm.
regions. We'd get better at keeping things local with each other,
Hmm.
resilient main streets kind of thing. But one
Hmm.
way I described mutual credit at a conference last year in Belgium, I spoke at a 4-day retreat on community currencies in Ezimal, Belgium. And then a couple days later, I went to a conference on local currencies in Liège, Belgium, and both were amazing. People from around the whole world who run or work on or study local currencies were speaking. And I ran a whole section on mutual credit. And I opened up this platform and this panel of speakers who are renowned around the world mutual credit people. And I'm like, how am I going to open this thing? I have this small system in Kingston, but I decided overnight, it came to me to describe it as a water system, as a marsh and a wetland. A complete ecosystem is what the current is. And we have the areas of that marsh that pool and sometimes stagnate. And that's when the movement isn't happening rapidly, and that's okay. That's where the bugs, frogs hang out, and they develop a unique ecosystem in that stale area. Whereas you have a waterfall that's flowing down and you have rapid movement, like at Tilda's. Tilda's is a rapid movement center that's building little eddies and whirlpools that then go to that lower pool. And because of hydrostatic pressure, that water is actually coming under the soil and back into the whole system again. It's almost like a closed loop circular economy where we talk about
Gotcha.
zero waste economies. This is an economic circular economy because
Yeah.
it's coming back into itself because it can't be converted to dollars and it can't leave our region. Let's say I have 5,000 currents. I'm going to figure out how to use them. I'm going to be calling members. And if I get too frustrated, I would call Chris Hewitt, the director, and be like, why can't I use this thing? That happens when people have too many. That's called pooling. And sometimes when pooling happens and it stagnates, it's unhealthy for the system, especially if frustration is built up around that pooling. So my job is to free it up. That happened at Hawthorne Valley Grocery Store. And over time, we freed up their pooling by having them use their currents on gardening. So our administration's job is to see who's stuck at negative 300 and who has too many. The rest kind of flows within itself.
Wow. So you take a proactive approach to making sure that the currents are being distributed or used across the network, so that it doesn't get stagnant or stale, as you say, and and I think there's partly a multiplier effect there, because I would assume that most of the people that are on the network now have a very similar belief or ethos about money and abundance and how to make a change in the world. And so it's only going to multiply the benefit within the community because you're supporting each other. Would that be
Right.
fair? Yeah. Gotcha.
Because that's one of my main talking points now. I have 4 talking points, and I don't talk about money. My talking points are the benefits of the current. One is it shifts the narrative around what money is. Just having it in our communities and in our existence means we have conversations like this.
Yeah, that's definitely, that's beautiful. I mean, for someone because it's interesting that you went to and held that panel discussion. I think you spoke to me about it briefly before as well. If someone wanted to replicate this, like, what are some of the things that you would kind of advise them to look out for, and what are things that you're experiencing at your current scale that are things to also be ready for?
I think that a local currency can start as simple as a small notebook in your back pocket where I keep track of, I watched your children for 2 hours and you would put your initials there, right? And this is how bartering used to be done in bartering networks before the internet. It was all in barter notebooks. That's super simple on one end. And then you can have something as complex as a cryptocurrency. We are somewhere in the middle where we're required by the IRS to be pegged to $1. So one current is worth $1. It's not volatile. It's not volatile. You can't buy low. You can't sell high. And so it's not speculative. So our system works with an app out of Holland. It's a out-of-the-box software called Cyclos, Cyclos. And anyone who wants to start a local currency can find an out-of-the-box software like that. And what it's called is a third-party record keeper. It's a ledger where it's like having the notebook that keeps track of how I did the 2 hours of babysitting.
Right.
But it's digital, and you can confirm it digitally.
Right.
So Cyclos, we started out with Cyclos for Communities in 2014. So it was free because we're a nonprofit. And for the first maybe 5 years, we kept the free version because we had under 300 members. So there's organizations out there that want you to use their free open source software. But then when we got large enough where we needed feedback and tech support, we had to start paying an annual fee. And then we were able to white label it, put our logo on there, create the website that links to it. So there's a lot that went into it over the years to become state of the art.
Right. Well, I mean, that definitely makes it a lot easier to get started. If there's already a tool or software out there that you could essentially just plug in, then if I wanted to make a little closed community currency with my friends, I could just use the software is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. That
Yep.
is that makes everything seem so much more easy, or at least feasible in some respects.
Hmm.
And it's interesting. So that sounds like, it's the technology is there, but then there's also the people aspect and the community aspect. Again, thinking about challenges that one might experience if they want to replicate this, what sort of advice would you have for that component, which is it's the technology is there, but it's not that if you build it, they will come. How do you get them to get onto that platform and onto that system?
That's a great question because it relates to many things like including revenue and being able to afford our growth. So you've talked to me about revenue diversification and making sure that all of our money's not in one basket or coming from one source. So over 12 years, do you mind if I go into this topic?
Yeah,
How
go for it.
over 12 years we've diversified revenue because at first we couldn't afford the full cyclist package. And we
Hmm.
couldn't afford to tell people about the Current, and we couldn't do a full marketing campaign. We couldn't launch our own publication, but now we have our own publication. We pay for inexpensive software. We are insured. Our board is insured. The people who work within the technology are insured. We've gotten trainings over the years for know your customer regulations, anti-money laundering, all these things that allow us to be legal. We have to spend a lot of money on to keep us abreast of the latest. When New York State became the first state in the country to pass virtual currency regulations, it was because of the growth of cryptos. But when we read the
Hmm.
first regulations, they were also regulating local currencies out of business. So then we
Right.
had funding to go lobby the state and meet with the Department of Financial Services. That took time and money. So as we grow, we have to also raise money to afford these things. So it's a lot of budgeting. It's a lot of thinking ahead. And so what I like, this brings me back to what we discussed earlier. As I as I think we built a great infrastructure and we can pass the torch to a new leader, now it'll grow to the next level over the next 25 years. And I hope it'll be around over 100 years because this isn't about one leader or one person. This is about community resilience. And you know what's cool? I'm on different threads and communication groups around the world about local currency. There's so many inventors in this world. Humans are reinventing money right now, and it's inevitable that it's going to shift. My hope is it shifts to about resilience, solidarity, support, love, care, all those things. Money can have all those things built into it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it speaks to like, when you start something or when you do anything in like a personal belief of mine, when you do anything in life, do it with intention. And if that intention is set properly, then it will, grow and germinate across the entire network. And I think what you're doing there with Current and definitely had the right intentions, and you can see it in the network and the people that are as members of your network. I can see it in them and in the work they're doing and how the people relate to each other. So, and you brought up an interesting point. So how do you continue to keep your ecosystem and the Current healthy, and how do you keep it growing, and how do you, in this case, generate more revenue?
Mostly by spending more money on things like strategic plans. So we've done 3 strategic plans in the last 12 years. We did a use and need study to see how useful and needed the Current was in 2014 as we were launching. Like, is this project even needed in our community? That study was great. And I think now in 2026, we need a new use and need study because our
Uh-huh.
economy is different. What we are used to and familiar with in the economy has changed. Inflation is very different. So I
Uh-huh.
think new studies to guide our new direction. And when we have a new director in February 2026, I think the first step will be to do a deep engagement with a strategic planning process and the board working with the new director to say, what are our next steps?
Gotcha. And when you say spending money on more strategic plans, are you spending current? Or are you spending US dollars?
Dollars. Last year we became For years, we've been the highest grossing earner of currents. And in the early days, our budget was 6 or 7% currents. So over 90% dollars. Last year, we became the first member to break 40% of our gross income in currents. So 60% was in dollars. That's huge. We're proving that currents can keep an organization afloat and it can keep money local. We're the main organization proving it. And so I often spend money on studies for qualitative and quantitative scientists to study what we've done.
I mean, there's something really beautiful there that I forgot to dive into, but so you are sustaining your business, 60% of it is through current and dollars. And so 60% is in dollars, 40% in current. What is the current paying for? Where are those revenue streams coming from, and what do you use it within your business?
The highest expense is labor. I get 30% of my salary in currents, and almost everyone who works at the current gets about 5% because anyone who gets currents on our team gets 10% off at the store. So people choose to earn part of their pay in currents. Our second highest expense is local produce and groceries at times from places like Hudson Valley Grocery Store. And so it's products that we're using to fill our shelves at
If no one's paying attention, this is a master class on how to create value streams or supply chains with alternative or what you call complementary currencies, because you effectively had to create the streams like across different businesses, different channels or lines of distribution, so that you could use the current in many practical or daily aspects of life.
Nice. Yeah. Well said. That's actually something I've learned from academics. Certain quantitative researchers have studied the current and me and why I do certain things. And they've taught us that there's different economic systems. One is called exogenous and one is called endogenous. An endogenous system is its own circle. And imagine
Mm-hmm.
all 400 members in that circle interacting with each other. And they're in the circle buying, selling, exchanging. But exogenous means we're outside of the circle. And we're pushing currents in and we're pulling them out because we could see who's at negative 300 and we can see who has too many. So it allows us to use our businesses to push and pull the system to stay healthy. Otherwise, we launch the software and say, good luck, everybody. There'd be stagnation and there'd be resentment.
That's beautiful. Like, I just have to ask this question. Are we at the level where I can pay for my electricity or my cell phone bill or my internet with current?
The main question I would ask you is, do you want to pay those multinational corporations with currents?
Oh, okay. Well,
It's
that's an
for
opinion question. I have
that.
nothing against them, but if I needed to choose between supporting my local community versus a multinational, I would choose to support my local community.
Nice. And so a better answer is also you have to be a New York State owned company to use currents. And so Central Hudson, for example, is owned by a Canadian company called Fortis. And with the conglomeratization of our energy and communication companies, it's very rare that we'll use currents with those kind of companies. But the cool thing is, like you said about supply chains and revenue streams within our economy, the current could inspire a local electric company to start. It could
Right.
inspire a local electrician and plumber to use it, right? And so
Right.
you're paying for part of your expenses within your home. And you know, there is an electrician, there's plumbers within the system. Our goal is to use our dollars for expenses like that. And then you free up your dollars for those national expenses and keep your currents local.
Gotcha. This is amazing, and it would also, like, given your skill now, it would be encouraging for local businesses to get onto the current, because then you can keep circulating that value within the community, and will grow the business and the community at the same time. So it almost feels like, yeah, get on the current. There's something that I just need to pick into a little bit more, because there's something that that from 0 to 1 or from 0 to 20.
Yeah.
Like, what was the thing that made it actually start working? Was it because of you bringing people in and convincing them that this is a good idea? Like, how would you, if you could, operationalize that, make it into some sort of playbook for someone? Because if they wanted to get to this scale, there's something there that you did that might be helpful.
That's funny because in that same conference in Belgium, I met a bunch of techies who want to turn my personality into more of an AI character, where like, how could we replicate Chris Hewitt's passion? That's what they would ask me. Like, you got all these people involved. You launched a restaurant and a magazine. You're a crazy kind of person, right? And I said, that's the kind of person who should launch projects like this. But
Yep.
then the problem becomes founder syndrome, and
Yep.
that person is the main center of the project. That's bad. In the early
Yeah.
days, it could be a passionate group. It was a passionate group. In 2014, we were in the early days from 2010 to 2014. It was really a book group discussing things like Schumacher's Small is Beautiful and David Corton's Agenda for a New Economy, and all these great books about the emerging changes to the economy. And that's what led to the law of the current. So in the early days, it was a passionate group where I became the director because I happened to land a grant for $300,000. And because of my fundraising skills, I stepped into an administrative role. But the board is still crucial. The party that you came to recently is our annual fundraiser. The board is highly involved in making sure that happens. And so it's a complex organization. And once I step down in February, I'll be joining the board because I love the projects we've built. But I think we're going to find a leader who sees the current differently than me.
Yep. So I'd love to dive into that part about you stepping down. But I don't know, Chris, I don't know if you gave me an answer here. Was it the grant that really kicked it off, or because one thing to get grant money, and I know this from like a startup background. When you get investment, you're not even halfway down. It's like you've just started your journey. Basically, it's
Right.
what you do with it. And so those actions that you took after you got the grant money, or even before, because you already had a group of people that were engaged and they were already inspired to try something different. And then once you got the grant funding, then those maybe like in high level, like what were the key activities that you did to get it from zero, or maybe your current group, to the next level, where it was no longer just your group of friends? Let's say that much.
Well, the grant funding, that 300 was spread out over 3 years. And so over those years, I started building advertising income, sponsorship income, board giving, individual donors. So all those revenue streams helped us grow. But what we've seen in our research, I'd love to show you these studies we've done because it's fascinating. Probably 15 to 20 page narratives about our work, but then it's all illustrations and charts and different ways that the current flows. You could see over the 12 years, every time we have a chunk of money come in, it allows me to hire more people. And because when you have more dollars, you can have more of a payroll expense. And every time we hire more people, we have more parties where the current members come together and the current takes off. Every time there's a bump in dollars, there's a bump in currents. It's fascinating.
Could I simply say that what you have done to build the current and to increase its membership is community building activities, more than it would be marketing in the traditional sense or sales in the traditional sense? What you did is you found ways to connect people, and then, hey, if you want to also exchange goods and value between each other, try using the current. Is that is that how you might put it?
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting because I tried to start having huge parties with 300 people, 400 people. In the early days, we thought our metric, I think I mentioned this to you, we thought our metric was grow the membership to 1,000 members, grow it to 2,000 members. That requires a marketing campaign. That requires a blanket message to sign up and use the thing, right? But if 1,000 people signed up and had a miserable experience, the project could fail. So we decided over time, our metric is movement of currents between existing members. That's the health flow of the current. And so we started shifting our focus, less marketing, more on interpersonal interactions. So we'd small parties and we would tell the photographers and journalists and publishers about it. And we would try to get people to come out in the clusters that they would have a natural affinity to within the system. If we brought all 100 members out, which we try sometimes, it's not as effective as bringing out 20 to 40 members at a time to get to know each other. Every time we get to introduce people, we are fascinated by the current movements that happen afterwards. It's really cool to see which towns they go to, new relationships that develop. That's really cool.
Yeah. So that's great. I mean, that's so what so parties, throw parties as
That's right.
the natural connections that are formed at a party, and then somehow masterfully, I mean, the party was centered around currents is what I would assume. Like you were
Yeah.
throwing a party about, yeah.
Well,
And that got people interested.
that's what Tilda's is. It's a weekly party. It's a
Uh-huh.
weekly party without alcohol.
Right.
It's an unfolding story and
Uh-huh.
community party where we get to experiment with each other. That's why we built Tilda's. It was too hard. If I had 1,000 currents in the past, I'd have to drive from Poughkeepsie to Newburgh to Ghent or Hudson and back to Woodstock just to use them up, right? Well, now Tilda's is a curated experience of current members. It's a one-stop shop. You can even order from our website and fill a grocery bag.
With current.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
then
Wow.
I would drive to anywhere in the region to deliver these
Yeah.
grocery bags.
Wow.
And you could see I'm passionate. And I
Yeah.
keep seeing businesses and building supply chains because other people don't do it. Like, I don't think I would have started Tilda's if 5 restaurants had signed up. But one restaurant signed up, and the owner's wife hated the current. He loved it, but she hated it. So now relationship problems, and so I was like, I'll just make a restaurant. We'll prove that the model works, and then other people will say, oh, I see how you did it in your numbers. I see that there's 1% on potatoes and whatever the numbers are,
Gotcha. So it's just it's a really I guess I'll never really get down to the bottom of it. But I feel like from you, there's something about leading with values, leading with purpose, and then being bold enough just to give it a shot, and maybe convincing enough to or charming enough to say, hey, I think you'd actually like trying this out. And then at the end of the day, throwing a big party with great food and having a good time.
Right.
Uh, yeah, but there's more to it, and I know it will probably take some time to get it all out. But I'm curious, about you've mentioned a couple times now that you are stepping down. Why now, and what's really driving that change?
Well, I think it's a really good time for the organization because we're in the middle of a 3-year grant funding cycle. And so we're in year 2 of a 3-year grant cycle built around resilience and community building and supply chain strengthening. So the 3-year funding cycle, we have our 3rd year starting in January. And so we have full funding to hire a director, full-time salary with benefits, paid vacation. And I feel like if I stick around, I can continue looking for grant funding. What I discovered is I'm an engine builder. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I know how to build pretty much any kind of business. And if I stick around at the current, that's probably what I would do. I'd keep building businesses that accept currents to make everyone say, well, where else can I buy it? Oh, you can get microtransit. You can go for a taxi ride. Well, where else can I use the current? You could go to my shoe store if you want and buy shoes. Like I would keep building businesses. So I decided I'm going to step aside and we're going to hire a director whose primary focus is the 400 members, re-engaging the 400 members that have been signing up since 2014, having better, more focused 20 to 30 people parties at Tilda's because we know it works. Tilda's is our headquarters, and or traveling the region too, going, having a party in New Paltz if it makes sense.
Yeah.
But director's new job will be 100% focus on the current because I've spent years now building a publication and a restaurant. So I built an infrastructure that will allow the next director to have lots of options for where the members can use their currents. And I believe as a board member, I'll stick around and make sure our projects stay afloat so that the director can just focus on the current and current movement.
Right. Because you're going to go off and start building more of the supply chain ecosystem. Yeah, that's okay. So that makes sense because I think there's the thread there in how you built the community is you had to keep on building. You had to keep on proving the model, and if no one was going to do it for you, you would do it. You would create a restaurant because
Exactly.
5 restaurants. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
And so how long is that going to be so you're stepping down as the executive director. You know, how funny question. How many years are you going to be spending building more current based businesses?
I don't know. How many more years do I have? Um, but I started a business recently with my friend Frank Waters. He's the director of My Kingston Kids, and this new business is called Ride Red. We believe that microtransit is going to be huge in the future. So I believe I'll be involved in transit my whole life. So at least another 30 years, I hope, of being in walkable, bikeable communities and microtransit solutions that are equitable and environmentally friendly. So Ride Red owns 2 bicycle rickshaws so far for Kingston, and we hope to build our fleet to 10 vehicles next year. And I hope to start a gardening company in the spring.
Sorry, where do you see Current in the next 12 months to 3 years? Let's say the next one is 3 years.
Well, it reminds me of just envisioning that 3 years. It reminds me of when my uncle gave his pizza place to my brother and me, and he had a stroke, but he was still alive, and he was in a wheelchair, watching the lines of people come through the pizza place, buying food, and we're sending kids out on bikes to deliver and stuff. It was on Fire Island, so there's no cars. My uncle says in his raspy voice, "Hey, Chris, get over here. I don't know what the heck you boys are doing, but keep doing it."
Uh-huh.
So we took his pizza place to the next level. We made so much money that he couldn't even envision was there. Families, deliveries. He only cared about the drunk bar crowd. We cared about the whole day and the whole shift. He changed that business so much that it blew his mind. So I hope to meet an amazing, dynamic new director soon through this interview process, and he or she will get to know the membership in a way that I didn't even get to know. The 400 members are complex and amazing local businesses and people. And then in 3 years, I hope to be sitting at one of these gatherings with my feet on the table saying, I don't know what the heck you just did, but keep doing it.
Gotcha. I mean, that's beautiful, and I hope that the right person comes through the doors there. And I know that it's an interesting question to ask, but when you do think about the next 1 to 3 years, what sort of partnerships or relationships do you think are going to be playing a crucial role for the growth of current industry or otherwise?
Mm-hmm. Well, you had a good question about, do I see a time where we're paying for electricity or other large scale bills? I think the future is about decentralization in general. So we might see small energy companies pop up and take currents, but more importantly, micro industry, I think is the future of not only our economy, but of the current. A great example is the Rondout Valley. Because the current started in Accord, our first cluster of members were in Kerhonkson and Accord. Then we moved to Rosendale with our office in like 2015, and our next cluster of members was in Rosendale. So wherever our presence is where the current starts to take off. Then we
Right.
moved 3 different offices in Kingston, and those areas of Kingston took off. So, so I think that when we were in Accord, it built a little network of businesses that got the Hudson Valley Seed Company to sign up, the Community Compost Company, and Bjorncorn. And those 3 businesses already are working with each other in ways, heirloom seeds, amazing popcorn, compost full circle waste stream, right? And so in the Rondout Valley, in the 209 corridor, there is major movement of the current. And when I actually drew a map of our 10 biggest members, and if the 10 of those members said yes to each other all the time about taking currents, because sometimes people get nervous and they're like, well, oh, this $2,000 invoice, no, I'd rather take dollars this time. Well, that slows down the current. But if you took the 2,000 currents and then the next person in that 10 business network said yes, you feel confident to say yes to the other person. So this is about confidence and comfort, right? And that's my job. I heard something like before the 1960s, people had a hard time talking about sex, death, and money. Since then, we've come a long way around sex and death, but we still haven't really addressed talking about money.
Right. That's hilarious. Well, we're talking about now. So, and
That's
hopefully
right.
this inspires some shifts and changes in the ecosystem and in the social fabric of what money actually is and what it means, and how to, I guess, use it more consciously, or to at least be more aware of the relationships that are happening that you don't see when you're
Mm,
exchanging funds. Let's say that much. So,
yeah.
uh, Chris, I'd love to ask you, in the last 12 years with Current, what what are some lessons that you think every social entrepreneur ought to know?
That the river is unexpected. It changes in ways that we can't always predict, and so we have to stay flexible and nimble. Um, we have to embrace failure sometimes and see the failure as a success by learning the lessons that it was trying to teach us. So I think, many times I feel like we've been building momentum and going a certain direction, and then we change course. So another big focus for a social entrepreneur is stay on mission if possible. Mission drift is real. And so I always have to, that's why the strategic planning process is so important for us, because the board can remind me, remember, this is the focus, you know? Also, there's a map that you may have seen at Tilda's. It's a map of
Yeah.
Midtown Kingston. It's a chalkboard map. That's my yes zone. Before I had that map, I used to say yes to everybody, no matter what town you were from. I want to collaborate with you. But now, if it's in my Midtown Kingston zone, I could physically be there. I could physically collaborate with you. Otherwise, I have to do something virtual or say I can't really, collaborate this time. It's helped me so much to learn how to say no, because I love saying.
Got it. Well, Chris, this has been a very, very, inspiring conversation. As always, every conversation I have with you, you always have amazing ideas. And I love hearing the way you explain the current, and also then learning more about how it's flowing, through many aspects of the community and the different businesses and people that use the current for day-to-day trade, but
Right.
also how it flows into your own life and how you think and how you communicate the greater value and the greater purpose of the work that you're doing. So I appreciate that so much, Chris.
Yeah, my
Uh,
pleasure.
well, there's one thing that I remember hearing you say, and this might be a good way to just to kind of end this on a really interesting note. There was something about money that you said, like it's just money, right?
Yes, that's our new slogan. Our slogan used to be money made by local trade. But then that gets your brain thinking like, oh my God, it's money made by local trade. What does it mean? But we've changed our slogan to simplify what the brain does. It's just money. And so I like that simplicity, that it's just money. We know that dollars work because they're just money. And if we eased our mind to know that the currents work, then we would say it's just money. But also because of our mission, our values, and the way we've built our business over 12 years as a nonprofit, there's justice within this money. We care about people. We don't charge interest. We don't extract from people's purse. We help give back. We're regenerative money that has built justice into the system. So it's just money and part of the just transition.
Amazing. I love that. I love the way you put it there. And so, as always with Chris, there's deeper layers and there's more layers and deeper meaning behind just money. So Chris, where can people find you?
Well, if you want to learn more about the currency, check out hudsonvalleycurrent.org. Our publication is also at midtownlively.org. And our community kitchen is tildaskitchenandmarket.com. So we have contact info at all of those websites and lots of FAQs. Feel free to engage us in any way you like.
And Tilda's is where? Which city? Which town?
It's 630 Broadway in Kingston. So come on by the physical space or check out the website to get to know us.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Great food, everyone. That was Chris Hewitt, co-founder of Hudson Valley Current, a 12-year-old nonprofit that has exchanged over 2 million currents and serves 400 plus members across mid-Hudson Valley. 3 interconnected ventures, the local currency, Tilda's Kitchen and Market, and Midtown Lively magazine. Chris and his team are proving that abundance, economics, and hyperlocal wealth circulation can create resilient, thriving communities. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who's passionate about local economies, alternative currencies, or innovative ways to scale mission-driven impact. You can learn more about Hudson Valley Current at hudsonvalleycurrent.org. Visit Tilda's at 630 Broadway in Kingston and connect with Chris on LinkedIn. As always, So Good to Grow Good is about scaling solutions that matter, and every story we share helps plant another seed of change. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep sowing good to grow good.